How are you, Ellen?
I'm okay.
Good.
I have some questions for you.
All right, let's do it. I appreciate it. A lot of
Okay.
times, folks will show up and
Mhm.
I don't often have too much time to prepare for these, so I rely on
Sure.
folks' burning questions
Yeah.
to kind of kickstart everything.
Okay.
I do appreciate it.
So I'm
Let's
in
give
the,
folks let's give
yeah.
folks 30
Okay.
seconds to kind of
Okay.
jump in.
No problem. No problem.
And we'll start, and then we'll start with you,
Okay.
Ellen.
All
Hey,
right.
Paul, we're just giving folks a minute or so to kind of jump in, and then we'll start with Ellen. She came prepared with some questions. I'm excited. And Swap Neil and Paul, if you guys are comfortable, I'd love to see your faces. If not, that's okay too. Carlos, let's see. Hi, Carlos. And I appreciate in advance everyone's flexibility with the rescheduling. I know sometimes I lose folks. Hey, Carlos. Sometimes I lose folks when I have to reschedule from Thursday to some other day of the week. And so one way to get around that is I will always reschedule the calendar invite, and folks are not automatically on the calendar invite. So I think when I mention on the NSA Slack channel, the random Slack channel, if you'd like to be added to the calendar invite, just shoot me a message or just mention something in the thread in the comments in the Slack message so that we can get you added to the calendar invite. Hi, Justin. Okay, cool. So let's just get started. Ellen had a few questions here. I see some new faces. I see some new really quickly. Can you
Take your
guys hear
time.
me?
Loud
Yeah.
and clear.
Okay, awesome. Really quickly, I've been part of the NSA group now. I've moderated two job search councils over the past year. All of them have moved on. I've been a recruiter now for the past 12 years, since 2012. In a former life, I was in software product development, product management. I've been doing this coffee with a recruiter thing on a weekly basis now since spring of last year.
Really?
And I saw it as an opportunity to give back and just connect with folks. I found that there's a lot of either misconceptions or myths or just lack of insight about the recruiting process, the recruiting mindset. And my feeling is that a little bit of insight, a little bit of information goes a long way in helping folks navigate their job search, their personal branding, their interviewing, and all that. This is very unstructured. I used to structure it more so in the past, but just due to lack of time and it's sort of just open forum AMA. Happy to dive deep into any questions you guys might have. I don't claim to have all the answers, but I have a strong recruiter's perspective, right? And a lot of times the
Right.
recruiters are your first line of defense, and they could be your best advocates and champions if you work it right, as far as the job search process is concerned. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's my preamble there. Ellen,
Okay. Take it away. So I'm also part of the NSA community, and I've also moderated two JSCs. And my personal career job search is stalling. I'm getting interviews, but I'm not getting sometimes. Okay. So I think part of the problem is that I don't have a very clear candidate market fit. I know kind of the things that I want to do. I don't yet have the right experience or I can't quite get there. So what I need to do is land something that with the skills I have, but I'm not that excited about landing something in that because it's not where I want to be. So it's been hard to motivate and then I've had some job interviews with so I worked for Caltrans for 6 years. And I did environmental planning for transportation projects. I did climate adaptation work. I'm very interested in continuing with climate adaptation, but that was only the last year. And, anyway, not to get into too many of the details, but, the people in my JSC right now are also stalling out. Some of them have been out of work for 2 years and there's just like, they're not getting anywhere. They're not going anywhere and they're not listening to the advice and they have their own hangups. And I know I feel like I'm getting influenced by that. Like I'm not advancing. And so, I'm also very influenced by Karen Weckery's networking. I know I need to be networking. I know I need to be sharing what I know and, that and get, network my way into a role. So I guess my question is, so it's between AI and hiring like a career coach. And this is kind of like a recruiter. I mean, it's a little different than a recruiter, but I'm wondering from a recruiter's perspective, and I know you also use AI in your professional life, in your career coaching or recruiting. So I read this Harvard Business Review article about using AI as a career coach, and they have like these 7 steps of what to do. And I also looked at Eric's newsletter, and he has this great article about if your job search is stalling, this is what you're doing wrong. You're not thinking about what the employer needs and how you're going to meet the employer's needs and all of that. So I'm thinking about both of those articles. I've read both of those this week. Just thinking about both of those things and like trying to build, I feel like I need to do a little bit of work with AI first, but I'm wondering like what value does a career coach bring? Like when is the right time to go to a career coach, and what can I expect? Because they're so expensive. It's like $350 an hour, and I'm not working. I can't afford, like, I can't do that. And I did a career coach before that. I've been to career coaches before, and it's like I have not getting to where I need to be. And so I guess I'm just wondering, like, how much can AI do? When do I need a person? How can I best work with a recruiter and not feel like I'm just being like shoved into whatever job they can't fill? That's kind of how it feels sometimes. Anyway, so this is kind of a big messy question. I'm sorry.
No, there's a lot there for sure, Ellen, and I appreciate sort of the background, the context. It's a multifaceted journey or struggle, right?
Yeah.
Everything from what you mentioned, I took some notes here, but everything from motivation to the pivot to, assess inventorying your skills and mapping which skills are transferable to something that you would be interested in and is available as a career path or an opportunity. A lot of stuff there. But just to zero in on the last question that I thought it came to a head to AI as a guide or as a coach. I have a lot of opinions about this because I've been using AI in so many ways. I'll give you a quick example. Not to name any names. I'm in a bit of I'm working in negotiating a settlement with a vendor of ours
Mm.
that has just not been providing the level of service, and I believe they're in breach of contract. I'm not an attorney. I don't have a background in law, but I know enough to be dangerous. I know enough to ask good questions of ChatGPT. And so I've teed up ChatGPT and I also use Claude as well to kind of compare and contrast to be my attorney, right? And the benefit of that is that you have unlimited hours with it. You pay 20
Right.
bucks a month and you could, if you're asking the right questions, you have a very strong advocate on your behalf, and you could load it up with all kinds of context about the situation.
Yeah.
Everything from your own personal interests or challenges to the whole history about the correspondence back and forth with said party, right? So you can just load it up with context. And these context windows of these LLMs are getting bigger and bigger. So it can understand more and more. And for those of you that don't understand what like a context window is, you could just imagine it as like think about when you're doing work on a desk, right? Your context window is like how many sheets of paper can you put on that desk that you can reference at any one given time? And these desks now these are getting large, like huge. The LLM can understand a lot about your context. And the reason why this is important, right, is because these things are just getting better and better and better, right? One of the challenges, a lot of the big complaints that I've heard from people that have used career coaches is one, which is what you said, is they're very expensive, right? You can find lower cost career coaches, right? But you kind of get what you pay for, right?
Yeah.
And even if you're paying, middle end or even premium for a career coach, I've still heard a lot of complaints from executives that I've worked with. And the complaint is this: their guidance and their feedback, their recommendations is generic. And part of that is because as a human being, especially as a human being that's not enabled with AI, which a lot of the career coaches are, they just can't manage all of the context of your situation to provide you hyper personalized guidance. They just can't. They're human, right? But these LLMs, they can connect the dots in ways that if you're asking the right questions, can draw out like some very, very powerful insights. So as far as like career coaching, I would go to ChatGPT or your favorite LLM first before you actually go and pay a career coach. And if you don't know what questions to ask it. Just give it whatever context you have, kind of what you just described. I mean, you kind of gave a little brain dump right there, Ellen, right? Give that same brain dump to ChatGPT. Tell it you're new to using AI. You need some guidance. You don't even know what questions to ask or where to start. Tell it where you want to go. This is what I'm hoping to get out of this. Guide me. Ask me clarifying questions. Take it step by step, right? And it'll do that. And then you'll start seeing the nuance of how you communicate with it. And once you get really comfortable with it, now you can tee up these I don't know, these mentors, these advisors for you in any capacity, whether it's a lawyer, an attorney, whether it's a interior designer, whether it's a mechanic for your car, whether it's a recruiter, right? Whether it's whatever. right? Whatever you need. Like, and so one of the things that I'm starting to become more vocal about is, and I hope this doesn't come across as discouraging. I think the whole job search process is broken. I'm concerned about what the future of work looks like as
Yeah,
AI, the economy, the macroeconomic forces that are at work
yeah,
are working to consolidate a lot of companies and labor forces, knowledge-based labor forces. And so I'm starting to just be more vocal about, having sort of a multi-pronged approach to basically selling your skills or your experience, right? And maybe that's not purely or exclusively like a full-time job.
yeah,
Maybe it's a side gig, maybe it's
yeah,
a combination of pursuing a full-time position, even if you aren't a full-time position, but also pursuing some sort of side gig. Maybe that side gig is multiple side gigs. Maybe it's a portfolio of
right.
side gigs, right?
Yeah,
Maybe one of those side gigs becomes your full-time gig. Or maybe you just, you have a growing set of multiple side gigs that eventually consumes and provides for you, and you don't need a full-time position.
yeah,
Right. So it's a bit of a way to hedge, but
yeah,
also a way to kind of learn and just adapt to the market. I've seen way too many people, kind of like you alluded to, over the past 12 months, 24 months, be so wedded to finding that full-time position.
yeah.
And then they go through these series of ups and downs, and then they're just completely demoralized. And they've done everything that they think they can in terms of
Hmm.
pursuing that full-time position. But, a large part of just where we are in these economic cycles and the technology cycles, I don't know what's going to happen, right? So I think if you could take a multifaceted approach, I think a sort of portfolio approach, I think it's a way to hedge, but also figuring out how to, just how to different ways that you could bring your skills to market, even if it's
Yeah.
creating your own market, so to speak. So I hope that helps. Any questions on that? Happy to dive in further.
Great. That's useful. Yeah. Yeah. Especially the last part. I mean, it's easy to get really scared about the future. Um,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. I mean, my mind just goes to all kinds of crazy ideas about what I need to be doing to prepare for like the end of the world or something. But yeah, I think taking
What's
a
what's
pragmatic
that song?
approach.
It's the end of the world as we know it,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
it really is.
Or there's the song with Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga, if the world was ending, I want to be with you or something like that. It's just so funny. It's like now there's love songs about this like crazy.
I mean,
Anyway,
the fact is that things are changing so fast. It really is the end of the world as we know it,
it
because
kind of does.
it's going to
I'm
be different
wondering
than
if it's
today.
about Moore's law.
Yeah.
I think the end of Moore's law has really changed the game for tech,
Hmm.
right? And so
Yeah.
I think that's where AI comes in because AI is a way to have growth, at least in terms of productivity, without having to be in the physical chip, growth thing, right? That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking. That's what I've been
Uh,
thinking lately.
and I'd love to hear from you guys. Like, where are you guys on sort of your, I guess, AI adoption application journey? How are you guys using AI, Justin?
Um, yeah, I'll take a shot at that. I would say that I used to use it quite a bit at work, and so in my personal life, I didn't. This was like maybe like a year ago. Is maybe like maybe a year and a half ago. When I had a job, I was using it. I'm a software developer, so using it quite a bit. Um, but I kind of had some quandaries about it, and so in my personal life, I didn't really use it at all. I felt like I used it enough at work and got like understood it enough. And then, yeah, like fast forward to now, I guess, I mean, I use it a lot more, but I still have the same questions and like hesitancies around it. But
What are
it's
your
like part of
hesitancies
my,
or reservations?
oh, just like how much energy it consumes and like
Oh,
where that will come from and like general like existential questions, I guess.
yeah.
But it's like fully taken over my field, so I have to be in on it kind of.
Yeah.
But
I
I
mean,
think
have you
that
found it to be
I've been
very,
using a lot of Claude to like ask it sort of the questions you were mentioning, like the ones
yeah.
where you give it your own personal context and it's helpful. Yeah, like I mean like there's huge benefits to it. I agree. Yeah.
I've just found it to be so amazing. And I mean, there's a lot of folks that they don't use it in the way that I described. And I don't know if, I mean, I don't think that I'm that innovative, right? But like, it just feels like once you start using it in that way, you just have, you basically have these advisors that can guide you in so many different. It just makes you. Have you guys seen that movie Limitless? What's that guy's name?
Bradley Cooper.
Bradley Cooper. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know that little pill, right? It feels like
Is it
this AI
limitless or
thing.
fearless?
Limitless.
Limitless.
It
Limitless.
was
Okay.
2012, a 2012 movie. Basic story is this guy has this pill and it just makes him super smart, just super smart, right?
Yeah.
And then he was able to like, it got him into trouble eventually, but yeah, just I hope that's not where we're going.
Just don't fall in love with your AI.
Yeah,
Use
gosh, I
it
mean,
as your therapist.
there's a whole subculture of that too, right? Like there's these things called
Yeah.
replica or whatnot, and people develop these intimate relationships or with
Crazy.
these
Yes.
companion kind of
It's
relationships
nuts.
with these AIs, and it's I don't know,
And
it's changing a lot of stuff, right? Like,
yes, and certain companies are thinking about, how to capitalize on that.
oh
That's
yeah,
really frightening,
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, we're going to get you to pay all this money and then, get you all emotionally and psychologically dependent on this thing. Like that's icky. So icky.
yeah. And
Very.
then at that point, I mean, these replicas or these AI companions they know so much about you,
Yes.
they could basically manipulate you in ways you don't even know.
That's
And not that
right.
we're not being manipulated anyway through social media,
Yes.
but yeah.
Or bad
So
actors
I
could
think we
get a
still
hold
need
of that
to maintain
information.
our critical thinking portion of
Yeah.
our brain. But
Well, I
all
think
right,
that's where your point about multiple streams is a really important one.
yeah,
And also thinking about things that AI will never be able to do. Like, let's say I become a Pilates instructor, or something, right? As one of my side gigs. Yeah, maybe AI could do that, on a Zoom or something, but they'll never be able to have, I mean, never say never, right? But let's hope maybe they could have a robot, right? Okay, right? I don't know. But for now, that's not something they're invested in, at least,
yeah,
and so it's going to be a while before there's robots teaching Pilates. And so,
yeah,
so maybe that's something I could do as a side gig, in the near term. I don't know how long it would take me to get qualified to do that, but like that's something that's completely, at least for now, untouchable by AI that could supplement other things I'm doing. I could do it after work or on the weekends or whatever.
yeah.
So like that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. It's like I need to start diversifying and sort of different dimensions of work.
I think so. I think that's the way to go. And I think it's not easy to do that, to shift your mindset to that, and you think about what barriers or headwinds might get in the way of that. And, it's just really that muscle of being resilient and being able to adapt and just keep learning, and just staying out ahead, and not resting on whatever specialization, we may have developed, and over the
Yeah.
past 10 years or so, 12 years, I've developed this specialization in recruiting, but I know that it's changing. What it means
Mm,
to be a recruiter is changing. And yeah, and not to say that there's no room for any recruiters, right? But I think sort of the human aspect of it is going to be reserved for humans. But a lot of the stuff that doesn't require a human component, it could be automated, operationalized, automated with AI, and I
Well,
think that's where
and
we're
this
seeing
is
a lot of
this is
things are
the other
going.
thing that I'm thinking about. If you're thinking about a long game and, like 25 years from now or something, let's say, I mean, AI is the it thing right now. But I really hear what Justin is saying about the energy use. And some people say, well, it's going to require less energy over time because they're going to make it more efficient and all of that. And that may happen, right? But the truth is, you know, um, anything that's asking to use more energy at this moment in history. That's a real vulnerability of this technology because energy is going to become more expensive over time. There's more and more demands for that energy. And then we're also
Yeah.
at a place where we're trying to transition our energy use, right? Just to survive. And so in my mind, I think there's no way that this is sustainable that yeah, right now we're all using AI and that may continue for the next 10 years as far as we know. But for 25 years, I don't know if we're going to really be using AI that far ahead. And what's going to happen is people are going to get dependent on AI. They're going to lose their skills, right? And then AI is going to crash. And then the people that still have the skills that they used before AI will have an edge. Those people will survive and they'll make it and they'll be the leaders. And the people that are completely dependent on AI and just went with the flow and gave up all of their knowledge and skills, they'll be out of luck. They won't have any skills. So,
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say which way things will go. And I think that, it's a big question of like what skills are valuable today, what are going to be valuable tomorrow. And if you just think about like, just first principle thinking, I think at least personally, I'm sort of betting on the skills that will be valuable is this the ability to learn quickly,
Yeah.
because that makes one adaptable, less rigid, more resilient, right? And, I think so that's a valuable skill. I think the skill of being able to connect the dots, I think AI is pretty good at that, but I think there's always a room for being able to, with our own, how do you say, our own senses, our own intuition and perspective, to connect the dots even beyond what an AI is capable of, or even augmented with AI,
Yeah.
connect the dots in new, different ways, So that's kind of what I'm betting on right now, not any one specific skill beyond that.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know. What do I know? But part of it, so I have children, right? And one of the things I question is like, what are they learning in school and what
Yes.
of those skills are going to be valuable?
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think I think the human skills are going to be valuable, which is
Mhm.
emotional regulation, right? Being able to learn and just have a passion for learning.
Yeah.
I think those skills are just I don't know. What do you guys think?
I mean, they're
What
still
do you
going to have to learn. I used to be a teacher, they're still going
Yeah,
to have to learn, basic math and English, how to read. They need to learn how to reason, they need to learn how to
critical
make
thinking,
sense of
right?
things so
Yeah,
that, and that's like reading for meaning, reading between the lines so first they need to learn how to read and then they need to learn how to interpret that, that what they're reading and
yeah,
understand it in a more sophisticated way so that they
yeah,
can call out the bullshit. That's one of the most important skills is knowing
yeah.
what's bullshit and what's not, and how to
And
find out
just to
how do
add to
you
that,
determine what's bullshit, right? A lot of
yeah,
people don't know how to do that.
just to add to that, right? Truth seeking, right?
Yeah.
You can't believe everything you read. You have to take that, being able to evaluate it critically
Mhm.
against what else you know, what else you've read, and start to formulate your own notion of what the truth is, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, being able to detect BS,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so much BS out there, and
Hmm.
being able to like discern what's real, what's truth, and what's not,
Yeah.
right? I think that's going to be a value. It's a valuable skill today, and I think increasingly so, it's going to become more
Yeah.
valuable skill.
I mean, I guess I'm really worried about, there's all kinds of dystopian things to worry about, but like if AI becomes, if the economy goes into a tailspin at some point, and then people become desperate for money, which some people already are desperate for money in various places in the world, and then, then that's going to increase the amount of like hacking, that's going to increase the pressure to do whatever kind of manipulation people will do to try to get money out of other people, right?
Fraud, crime,
Whether
yeah.
it's like Meta, trying to capitalize on people's emotional vulnerabilities or whatever, I mean, from that extreme to like, projecting, creating some kind of a drama that's not real in order to manipulate people into giving money or doing things that they want them to do,
Yeah.
and so like, how do we train kids to be able to have that level of sophistication, like, knowing that they could be manipulated, and how do they tell whether maybe there's potential manipulation? Like that's really sophisticated,
How to
you
tell
know.
whether they're in the matrix or not.
Yeah, I mean, who do you trust? How do you decide who to trust? What
Yeah.
sources, what information sources do you trust? And hopefully those information those sources will continue, right? Hopefully we'll
Yeah.
always have the New York Times and the free press that we have, that we can't take that for granted, but hopefully we always will, right? I
Yeah.
mean, things like that, right? It's scary to ponder if we lost all of that.
Yeah. So for the rest of the folks here, we're just kind of going on a little bit of tangent in terms of like AI. I think a lot of
Sorry.
folks are, you know, curious about it. I'm curious about it. You know, um, but I think it's all sort of interrelated in terms of like the job search, the future of work, and I talk a lot about this stuff with my guests on my podcast because it's something that's so fascinating to me and to the folks that join me in conversation on my podcast. And so I don't mean to turn this forum into a podcast discussion, but yeah. So anyway, anybody have any other questions that I might be able to help with? Maybe something I have more experience with versus
I
the
had
future
a
of AI.
I had a question about so yeah, I used to work for Microsoft, so I worked for like big big tech, I guess, for a while, and now I'm trying to get into more climate tech. I'm trying to like use my software skills for more like that kind of field, and I find it difficult to get any response from recruiters or from just like applications as well. I'm wondering if there's a certain way that I can reach actual people and like maybe I get any traction there.
Yeah. So that's a common problem, right?
Yeah,
You apply, you don't hear back, how do you navigate sort of the side back door to connect with
yeah,
the right people? The flippant answer is networking, right?
yeah.
But there's different ways to go about doing that, and it takes work. It takes sort of consistency. So what I would recommend is sort of a path, whether it's automated or something that you do manually in a very focused and consistent way. Is trying to find ideally you're trying to find either the hiring manager or the recruiter that is working with that
Mhm.
particular role that you're interested in as a
Okay.
sort of a tertiary or secondary, just anybody that works at the company that might have influence, right? That can help you navigate to the right people. But ideally, if you can connect with the hiring manager or the recruiter, right? And that
Yeah.
sounds obvious, right? But how do you connect with folks like that? It can be challenging, right? Because not everybody does this, but there's a meaningful amount of people that do this in terms of trying to reach out to them on LinkedIn. And so they're not they're accustomed to getting people reaching out to them, right? I'm accustomed to people reaching out to me when I have when I have a search that I'm working on and they want to, sort of backdoor, side door, right? So people do it. Not a lot of people do it, but people do it. And even fewer people do it with consistency, and even fewer people do it with sort of an approach that would catch my eye. Right. And as a recruiter, what would catch my eye is when you set yourself apart from just being a run-of-the-mill candidate, right? When you lead with some sort of insight or value that is immediately relevant to me as a recruiter, that's the pattern interrupt. And
Okay.
that's what catches recruiters or hiring managers' eyes. That's what sets you apart. That's what sets your message, your LinkedIn message or whatever apart from all the other messages in the LinkedIn or email inbox, right? Because
Okay.
most of what people do is they'll lead with something like, hey, I'm interested in this opportunity for this, and this reason. Would you have a few minutes of your time to chat with me about it?
Hmm.
Right. And so it's leading with an ask. And as a recruiter, especially recruiters nowadays that are increasingly being asked to do more with less, it's like, if you want more from me, like I don't have that much to give anymore. Like my time is strapped. I have 10 requisitions I'm working on. They have 800 resumes or applications in each. I just don't have the time. Right.
Yeah.
So part of what I can share with you as a recruiter is like what I see people do and what I see people, or even fewer people do. And I can tell you what people do and what people don't do, right? As far as my own experience, right? Assuming that, that's representative of some portion of reality. So if you lead with something that adds some sort of value, some sort of perspective or insight, um, that is relevant to the recruiter and relevant to their interests, that would catch my eye. That would catch my eye. And how do you do
Hmm.
that? Well, you have to know a little bit about the recruiter. You have to know a little bit about the recruiter mindset, what their interests are. You have to know a little bit about the company, maybe the culture, right? And you have to do some homework there. But I mean, as far as the recruiter mindset and their incentives, like a recruiter, it might not sound like it, but the recruiter wants to fill the position. They want to find you.
Yeah.
If you're the right person, they want to find you. So you have to be easy to find, right? And there's different aspects of that. Having a great LinkedIn profile that gives them, the recruiter, what they need quickly, because the
Yeah.
recruiter is ultimately trying to make a case for your candidacy. And when you think about how they make a case, typically what I do, right? I'll review a resume, review a LinkedIn profile, interview the person, and then when I'm making a case for the candidate that I think is strong, I'll do like a little write up, right? And the write up it's very brief, it's bite sized, and it goes to the hiring manager and it says, "Hey, talk to Justin. Here's why. Ba, 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 ba. Here's where Justin is the right fit. Here's where he might fall short or where we need to dig in further." Right.
Mm.
And so if you can help the recruiter basically write that,
Okay.
you're a step ahead. Because a lot of times the candidates don't help the recruiter write that. The recruiter has to sift. They have to sift the resume. They have to massage stuff, and it's easier now with ChatGPT. But if you can make it easier for the recruiter to pull out what they need to make a case for you, right? And that's what the cover letter used to be for.
Yeah.
But a lot of times recruiters, including myself, they've been conditioned not to read cover letters because they're so generic. And that's where, and then a lot of companies, a lot of recruiters don't even ask for cover letters anymore, because they feel like it's just a waste of their time because people are just writing generic cover letters,
Mhm.
right? So if they're asking for a cover letter, what I'd recommend is write it in a way where that recruiter could basically copy and paste from it into their write-up, their submission. That's
Yeah.
basically making a case for you,
Okay. Yeah.
right? That would make my life easier as a recruiter.
Okay. And the contacting of them, it's okay over LinkedIn, or if I found
Oh
their
yeah.
email, would email be okay too?
If you can get their email, and there's different tools out there to get people's email addresses and to validate, whether they're legitimate email addresses. Before just doing a cold outreach, I would try to get some name recognition. And the way to do that is to largely, especially if they're active on LinkedIn, most
Yeah.
recruiters are active on LinkedIn, is
Yeah.
to engage with their content if they're creating content or engage with their comments. So not a lot of recruiters, not all recruiters write content. They don't write posts. Sometimes they'll
Yeah.
repost stuff or sometimes they'll comment on stuff.
Mhm.
But the way to get your name recognition with them is just if they're doing the bare minimum and they're like doing occasional comments, on
Yeah.
somebody else's post, engage with that post, engage with their comment on that post.
Okay.
Then they'll start to see your name pop up. And so it's a little drip campaign-ish,
Yeah.
right? But
And then
but
they'll
that
like
little
go to my profile, and if I've got my profile
yeah,
up to date
yeah.
in a good way. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and write a meaningful, relevant, thoughtful comment, right?
Right.
Yeah, and make sure it's like intriguing, it's thoughtful, it's yeah, it's engaging. Maybe it's sort of it riffs off whatever their comment was, or if they wrote a post, maybe make sure it riffs off their post. And so that's
Yeah.
that's one thing that you can and should do to
Okay.
get sort of some name recognition. That way, when you do eventually reach out to them on LinkedIn or whatnot, there's a little bit of background ready, at least some name recognition,
Cool.
So it's cutting through the
Yeah.
noise. There's a lot of hiring managers, people, everyone's dealing with noise, and if you can, cut through that and put sort of a concerted signal through different avenues like that, I think it helps. But again, it takes effort and time and persistence, right? Sometimes it's a bit of a medium/long game to doing that. So I hope that helps, Justin.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Big time.
To put you a little bit in the hot seat, Eric, can you
Yeah.
think of it doesn't have to be precise, but in your experience on a reach out like that, can you think of an example of something that really caught your eye and said, okay, I need to get back to this person?
If you think about the clever ways that some of these marketers grab your attention, right? Because I'm sure you guys are getting this too, right? There's like spam emails from somebody you've never heard of pitching some product or service that you're like, wow, how is this even relevant to me? But
Right.
sometimes they do these little tricks where it's like, Steve thought we should connect. Steve. He causes you to pause for a minute, right? Like, oh,
Right.
Steve, which Steve was that? And this person's a friend of Steve. Okay, let me dig in. Let me click into it and see what's going on.
Okay.
Right? I mean, they're kind of gimmicky, but and the spam emails that I get, not all of them do this. It's only a small percentage of them that do this.
Right.
And I don't know all those gimmicks. I'm just speaking anecdotally about some of them that I've seen. You could probably ask ChatGPT or Perplexity, what are some of these gimmicks? Act as a expert email marketer with street smarts about using clever subject lines to get somebody to open your email. Like, give me the top 5 gimmicks or tricks that would compel somebody to be curious and open the email. That kind of prompt right there is something you can start with, right? I don't know. I don't know all the tricks. I don't claim to know all of them,
Yeah,
but that can give you some ideas,
yeah.
right? And some of them might be super gimmicky. You're like, oh, this is kind of cheesy. I'd lose more credibility doing this than anything. It's not even worth it. But there might be some that are legitimate. Like, it's like, oh, maybe I could or should do that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I wouldn't do something for me anyway. I wouldn't do something like, "Hey, Steve told me to connect." If I never knew a Steve either. Honesty is still the best policy here,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, what's bad too is not everyone's a marketer. So everyone's
yeah,
has to use a part of their brain that, especially if they're in a technical field, that they're not used to using.
yeah.
And that's the challenge.
Annie, were you on earlier when Ellen, Justin, and I were riffing on basically these advisors, these expert advisors that you have in your pocket now.
Right.
Were you on?
I had to show up late because I had another meeting.
Okay, quick. By the way, I'm recording this. We'll put this on YouTube. You might not have experience in marketing, right? But I
Right.
know that you have experience asking good questions. And
Right.
that little prompt that I gave, just off of a riff, you could maybe look at the transcript of this recording. You can use that as a starting point, right?
Yeah.
And now you have an expert marketer in your pocket, literally,
Yeah.
right on your phone, ChatGPT, right? And you can brainstorm, you could lean on its expertise and its insight. Here's another trick that we didn't really talk about so much, Ellen, but if there are any thought leaders or experts, like actual people, Tony Robbins or Warren Buffett, whatever,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You can invoke their expertise and experience by telling the GPT to act as Tony Robbins, to
Yeah.
act as,
Yeah.
and basically the GPT will reference all the literature of their work.
Yeah. Yeah. I talked to a guy in the JSC community or the NSA community who talks to Claude like every day. And he likes that Claude has different channels or something. I don't know if GPT does this too, but so he like basically creates his own different, like, so he has like an executive assistant Claude. So then, that part of Claude like arranges all his meetings and takes notes,
Yeah.
whatever. And it's not perfect because it took notes in our meeting and the notes were totally not accurate. It was really funny. Mixed up who said what, and it was very funny. But anyway, but he has that. And then he has like an executive board or whatever. So he said, you
Yeah.
don't have anyone on your executive board. So you have like
Yeah.
a board of advisors, right? You could have Steve Jobs, it could be anybody, you get dead or alive, right? Because they can pull in, like you said, all the insights. They're still not going to be as good as the actual person, I think, because, it's backwards looking, right? It's only backwards looking. It can't look forwards. It can only look backwards. And so it'll tell you what Steve Jobs would have told you 25 years ago or whatever, which maybe that was the best version of Steve Jobs. Who knows?
I mean, I guess the counter argument to that, Ellen, is that there's some timeless principles over the last, whatever, 2,000 years that regardless of where we are today, they still apply and you can tap into that. Annie, one thing I would challenge you to do is just create that marketing advisor for yourself,
Okay.
in ChatGPT. And, ChatGPT has this notion of projects. They have a notion of these customizable or custom custom GPTs. And they're all about setting the context, right?
Yeah.
So the context is, in this example, hey, you are a marketing expert, like, name your favorite marketing expert. And, your job is to do this, and this. And here's the context about my needs, my preferences, my challenges. And once you kind of start to set that context, now it kind of knows you, right? And it'll get better at knowing you, especially the more you use it. So I would challenge you to kind of just create your own marketing advisor, right? And one way to start is if you don't know any names of marketing, you can go to Perplexity. Perplexity is a little bit more real time in terms of like being able to scour and do research on your behalf and ask it to just tell him what you're doing. Tell it what you're doing. In terms of like,
what's the best ones? GPT has the most knowledge, right? So, I mean, like Claude, like how do you pick which one to use?
So yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I won't say that this is the way to do it, but the way I do it is I use Perplexity largely for research. So basically, Perplexity replaces my Google. I don't use Google anymore, except for one reason. I'll use Google to find a link to a website. So if I'm like, oh gosh, what is the name of that? What's the URL for that? That Canvas creating design application.
Yeah.
I would just type that into Google. And the reason why is because it's faster and all I need is a URL. I don't know the URL to that website.
Yeah.
I use Google. Everything else I use Perplexity as far as like research.
Yeah.
So if I want to do like, if I'm trying to find the best restaurant for, in Los Angeles, because I'm taking a trip down there, I'll ask Perplexity. It scours the current web and it'll pull out reviews and blah, blah, blah. If I'm doing something that's like kind of like what you're describing, Danny, as far as like, helping with your personal branding and things that are a little bit more thoughtful, I'll use ChatGPT. If I'm using something that requires a little bit more better writing skills, Like if I want to create an article, I'll use a combination of Perplexity to do the research, and I'll feed whatever research I have into usually Claude to help write. And so that's kind of how I use it. From what I've seen, my experience, and what I've read, Claude tends to be a better writer. Like if you want it to write for you, a ChatGPT tends to be like highly analytical. And then Perplexity is just like your research team, you know.
So here's another question, because yeah, I'm trying to think out of the box too.
Yeah.
You're saying like, okay, the first 1 second that you see a message and you open it up, what is your thought on including a very tiny kind of like banner image?
Like in a LinkedIn message that you're
Yeah, like
sending out to.
yeah. So the first thing, I haven't even done this before. I don't even know if you can do it in a LinkedIn message. But yeah, just kind of a thought of it, like, here's a quick visual banner that's just got a tagline or something with a nice image, then a
I
really
don't know that
quick,
you can send an image in that way. Like when you're sending
yeah,
an image, or you could send an attachment, but it doesn't show up as far as I know. Yeah, it doesn't show up like visually, I don't think. I mean, I can test it. I don't see people do it, but I like where your head is at, because if people don't do it and you're able to do it and you do it, again, in the spirit of like the pattern interrupt,
yeah,
like you could get more visibility or more engagement from that.
yeah.
Uh,
I'll experiment. I mean, you don't have to research it. It was just
yeah,
a thought pattern I had on, like, if I was a recruiter, and we're all visually oriented people anyway,
yeah,
that might grab some attention if it's possible to do that. It's the first I've thought of it, so I don't even know if it can be done, but at least at
yeah.
LinkedIn anyway. In an email, you could do that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and if you're asking like what my reaction would be to something like that, people don't do it, and I think there's value in doing something that other people don't do in terms of getting attention. I guess the taken to an extreme could be, and yeah, that's where you have to use your own judgment, right? Like it
Yeah.
could be so gimmicky that it could compromise your integrity, your not integrity, it can compromise your credibility,
Right,
Yeah.
right.
right?
Yeah,
So,
I obviously would be an image that is focused on the role still.
yeah,
And you can use something like Dolly to create kind of like, ChatGPT of like, hey, I want an image marketing oriented for this role that catches, whatever the AI prompt instruction would be. And it could still tailor make the image for that specific communication.
yeah. No, I like where your head is at, like just thinking creatively about like there's no one playbook. I think what I like about the NSA is that it prescribes a playbook, but
Yeah.
also it's a bit adaptable. Like there's no one way to do this, right?
And
And
and I like NSA too. I've been with it for a few months now. I'm actually in two JSCs just because I'm heavily fast track. And there's a lot of groups there. There's 50 plus group, there's the tech group. I mean, that's the other nice thing, is there's a lot of avenue for communication. Forgot where I was going with this. Anyway, sorry. My brain just kind of, it's
crazy.
going 12 places at once and they're all fighting now. But yeah, I do appreciate JSC. I've also been reading the 2 Hour Job Search book,
Okay.
but
I haven't read it.
huh?
I
I've
haven't
read
read
it.
that book.
Read
It,
that one.
it's got some good advice, but I like how you kind of corrected, because this was written 2 or 3 years ago. And there's a lot of, like you just talked about, the initial outreach interaction, I think is outdated. So this is why I like these sessions
Yeah.
where I'm talking with you in real time, your experience. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate this.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, there's other, we talked a little bit about doing outreach and, finding the side or back door and, ways that you can, just start to seed and engage with content, for example.
Right.
I mean, the other thing that a lot of people they're starting to do a little bit more so now, but it's just sort of creating that personal brand for yourself through
Yeah.
LinkedIn and starting to create your own content.
Yeah.
Be it in the form of, as a start, right? LinkedIn posts, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you can start to, sort of evolve into like a newsletter where you're writing maybe long form content. And
Right.
the content is, related to, what your craft is, professionally, ideally. And,
Yeah.
basically positioning yourself as an expert in your domain. Yeah.
Well, and I do post a lot on LinkedIn, but a lot of times it's just crazy stuff, or, humorous comments that get, people laughing at least a little bit, you know, but I do need to work on the long form content. That's one thing that's still on my ever huge to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And, again, like Perplexity and these chat GPT LMs can help with the process. And yeah, so yeah, I hope this helps. There's a lot of different ways to sort of do this. And, hopefully at least I can give you some perspective around what I see people do and not do. And I can give you sort of my reactions as a recruiter if you were to do something and, how I might react to it.
I will definitely check out your YouTube. Unfortunately, my JSC meets at pretty much the time that you have your coffee chat on
Oh, on
Thursdays.
Thursdays.
But I will still review afterwards the things you guys discuss. So definitely appreciate that.
I reach out, Danny, if there's anything I can help with.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. If at some point you have a chance to look at my LinkedIn, that would be great. But I know you're a very busy person.
And and that's part of the reason why I do this sort of as a group. And I'm happy to entertain any ideas that you guys might have. Like, so for example, Danny, if we want to do like a session where I just give my initial reactions to people's LinkedIn profiles, I'm happy to do that. And I think part of my requirements, I'm trying to minimize the amount of one-on-one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to maximize, if I can do one to many, where I can,
Yeah.
Okay.
where I can help many or support many
Yeah.
versus one-to-one. I'd prefer to do that,
Okay.
so I'm open to any ideas you guys have.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of like some of our more general JSC groups, like the 50 plus and the tech group and all that, because we have a meeting of like 20 people, and for an hour we'll review each other's stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe what differentiates me is that just my experience as a recruiter.
Yeah.
So everything's just through the recruiter lens, I guess,
Yeah.
and I think that's where I saw the gap, where I saw the need, because you're JSC, there's a lot of very smart folks, very smart, very resourceful folks in my experience that are involved with the Never Search Alone community. And I think what might be missing a little bit is just the recruiter perspective,
Yeah.
right?
I would agree with
I,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that's what I can offer.
Okay.
So,
Terrific. I will connect with you today, and it's the weekend, so I'm not going to pester you with messages, but I'll reach out again on Monday.
sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much, Eric.
All right, guys, have a great weekend. And we'll talk to you guys next week.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, bye.
Bye.